Yesterday, seemingly out of nowhere, Mojang announced an update to Minecraft's Java edition, which is going to fundamentally change the way Minecraft modding works and could easily be classified as the biggest change to Minecraft modding basically since the inception of this game. And in the short term, it could cause some delays and disturbance in the modding community, but in the long term, it might have a very positive effect. So you might be wondering, Kasai, what's this all about? Well, Mojang casually dropped this news article yesterday, which is called Removing Obfuscation in Java Edition, and what this means for the modding community. Now, one thing I want to make very clear straight away is that I've never made a mod of my own. I'm not a modder, I'm a YouTuber, I make videos. I'm not gonna dive into all of the technical details as I simply don't have experience with them myself. I will, however, attempt to explain everything in the most simple terms possible so everyone can understand. And also, huge shout out to the Zoomify guy for helping me with this video. Okay, so first, quickly, let's look at what Mojang is actually telling us. For a long time, Java Edition has used obfuscation, a common practice in the gaming industry. Now we're changing how we ship Minecraft Java Edition to remove obfuscation completely. We hope that with this change, we can pave a future for Minecraft Java Edition where it's easier to create, update, and debug mods. Okay, so in case you know nothing about modding or coding whatsoever, quick explanation. Minecraft Java Edition, just like essentially every other game, has parts of the code that are obfuscated. It means that a part of the code is hidden. This is, like Mojang said, a very common practice in the gaming community. Essentially every single game does this. But if parts of the code are hidden, it of course makes it harder to mod that code. Because you'll just see a random string that doesn't really mean anything. And as a result, before you can actually mod, you have to figure out what that random thing means. And this is why the community started creating mappings. Now, what are mappings? Well, I guess you could look at them as dictionaries. They are pieces of documentation which basically tell you what each part of the code actually means. Now, there are multiple of these mapping dictionaries available. A very popular one is Yarn, Y-A-R-N, which are, for example, the mappings that Fabric uses. But like you can see, it is free to use for everyone. So these mappings, these dictionaries, that is basically how you were able to mod the game. You would first get Minecraft, decompile the jar, and after that you would first apply mappings so that the code would actually become readable. And after that you could actually start coding your own mod. And then after you're done coding your mod, you would have to re-obfuscate the code so that it would actually work with the game. Now eventually in 2019, Mojang actually released official obfuscation mapping. So in other words, Mojang released a dictionary of their own. They were actively obfuscating their own game, which again is nothing weird, like most games do this. But then they were also providing a, dictionary, official mappings, so that modders could make sense of what all of that scrambled code actually meant. Now, according to Zoomify guy, this official mapping wasn't that great, and it was actually missing a lot of parts. So other mappings, like for example Yarn, were still more complete. So here you can kind of see the difference. Here we got the obfuscated code, and then here we got obfuscated code with the mappings applied. So you can see that all of this scrambled code, which doesn't really mean anything, suddenly turns into something which is actually readable, and which you can actually use to code a mod. But what Mojang has now announced is that they're gonna remove obfuscation from Minecraft Java Edition completely. Nothing is gonna be scrambled. They will fully allow modders to read the jars and, mod the game. Minecraft Java Edition has been obfuscated since its release. This obfuscation meant that people could not see our source code. Instead, everything was scrambled. But those who wanted to mod Java Edition had to try and piece together what every class and function in the code did. Now, this piecing together that Mojang is mentioning, those are the mappings. But then they say, but we encourage people to get creative both in Minecraft and with Minecraft. So in 2019, we tried to make this tedious process a little easier by releasing obfuscation mappings. So that is that official dictionary I just mentioned. But what is going to change now? Well, they're going to remove obfuscation altogether. To make things even easier and to remove these intermediate steps, we're removing obfuscation altogether. Starting with the first snapshot following the complete Mount of Mayhem launch, we will no longer obfuscate Minecraft Minecraft Java Edition. This means that this build and all future builds will have all of our original names to make modding even easier. And yes, on paper, this makes modding a lot easier. You no longer have to pull up the dictionary. You no longer have to translate what everything in Mojang's code actually means. You will just know it straight away. It is no longer scrambled. That is amazing news. But, and there's a but, currently the whole concept of Minecraft modding is built around the idea that the code is obfuscated. So the vast majority, if not all, of the modding tools out there are built with the concept of obfuscating and mappings in mind. Mojang removing obfuscation from the game completely means that all of those tools will no longer work. So all of the code and tools with this mapping and obfuscation in mind will essentially need to be rewritten before anyone can even make a new mod in this new unobfuscated game. Now this could potentially mean that, in the short term at least, there might be some delays when it comes to new mod loader versions and new mods. This doesn't necessarily have to be the case though, as Mojang also knows that all of the current existing modding tools are designed with obfuscation in mind, which is why for a while at least, they're gonna release two versions. They're gonna release a snapshot with unobfuscated code as an experimental release, and they're also gonna release an obfuscated snapshot. But then, as soon as Mounts of Mayhem actually releases, from that point forward, there's only gonna be a non-obfuscated version. Mod loaders like Fabric have to decide if they're gonna fully embrace this new unobfuscated system, which does sound like the most logical decision. But that does mean that projects like, for example, Yarn will be rendered mostly useless almost immediately. Like a big portion of the project is just gonna become redundant. And you might be like, oh, well, that's good. Now we no longer need this intermediate project. And yes, that is true, but it's also kind of sad. There are so many people who have contributed to this project and devoted literal years of their life to this project. And most of it is going to be rendered completely redundant by this single update from Mojang, which is actually really sad. Now, just to be clear, that doesn't mean this is a bad move by Mojang. It is an amazing move from Mojang, and it is something to be very hyped about. But of course, everyone who has worked so hard on all of these mapping projects, yeah, they're not going to be very useful anymore in a bit if the game is not obfuscated at all. So what does this actually mean? What is the true effect going to be? Well, first of all, the vast majority of those third-party mapping dictionaries, you're not gonna need those anymore. The whole game will be de-obfuscated. But that does mean after all of the mod loaders have adapted these changes, modding the game should become a lot easier. At the same time though, mod developers that have previously learned to code mods with all of these mappings in mind now have to partly relearn how to actually make mods. Because yes, on paper it's gonna be more simple, but if you're used to doing something a certain way, basically since the game's inception, and now that is suddenly going to change, yeah, you will have to relearn some stuff, and that can be hard. So for some mod developers, depending on what type of mapping they were using, it is gonna be a pretty huge change. From what I've been told, mostly for Fabric, it is gonna be a very big change internally, and also a big change for the mod developers. For platforms like NeoForge, on the other hand, it is gonna be a little bit less drastic, because NeoForge was actually already using the official mappings that Mojang released in 2019. But it's still gonna have some impact. But what it basically all comes down to is that, in the long term, modding Minecraft is gonna become easier. Mojang is no longer gonna obfuscate anything, and therefore, as soon as all of these different tools have adapted, in theory, modding the game should be a lot easier than before. It is very sad that all of these different projects that were made to map this game's code are all gonna be useless. But in the long term, it is most likely, and it's always a most likely because we can never know for sure, but it is most likely gonna have a very positive effect on the modding community. Another positive effect which this update could have is that after everyone has adopted, the whole community will basically be using the same type of mappings. If you could even really call them mappings, because there's not much to map, but that does mean that over time it will most likely be possible to make a single jar file of a mod work on multiple different modding platforms. So because they're all using the same behind the scenes system, basically, it is probably going to be possible to have a simple Zoomify jar that could work on both Fabric and NeoForge. And to be clear, this is something which is already possible, but if you want to do that, you basically have to double the size of the jar. But after all of this goes into effect, that is no longer going to be the case. Now, just to be clear, this is not going to mean we're going to get one big mod loader, and it also doesn't mean that every single mod will now automatically work on every single platform. Absolutely not. But if every single mod loader is using the same mappings, it is going to simplify things a lot. Now, I've tried to keep this video as easy to understand for everyone as I could. Therefore, I've also not jumped into every single detail. So if you have something to add to this story, feel more than free to leave it in the comments of this video. I'm sure many would be very interested to read that. It's a big shift. Minecraft modding is gonna change forever, mostly behind the scenes, but in the long term, it could make Minecraft modding more accessible and easier, and just in general, I think it is really good to see that Mojang acknowledges the Minecraft modding community, where they even say modding is at the heart of Java Edition. It is so great to see that they acknowledge modding is what makes Minecraft Java Edition so awesome, and them actually taking steps to make that process easier. I think that is just an amazing win. But do let me know what you think about this in the comments down below. And with that being said, that's gonna be it for today. Do make sure to subscribe to my channel, join my Discord. Thank you so much, channel members. And then I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye, see you later, bye bye!